The clinking of crystal glasses cut through the low hum of soul music, playing in my parents' dining room. We were gathered around the mahogany table that clears throat. My mother Brenda polished obsessively for occasions exactly like this. The spread was immaculate, a testament to her need for outward perfection. My older brother Jamal stood up from his chair at the head of the table, pulling his wife Chloe up beside him. Chloe smoothed down her expensive maternity dress, a designer piece I knew for an absolute fact. Jamal had put on a credit card he could barely pay the minimums on. Jamal cleared his throat with a self-important smile that barely reached his eyes and announced to the room that they were expecting baby number 3. My father Calvin immediately pushed his chair back and raised his glass of bourbon. He praised Jamal loudly, his voice booming off the dining room walls as he talked about how a man builds a true legacy through his children. He spoke about Jamal as if my brother were a titan of industry, conveniently ignoring the reality that Jamal was a 8-year-old junior loan officer who still needed financial help to cover his car payments. My parents cheered and clapped. I smiled politely, taking a sip of my water, genuinely hoping the announcement would end there and we could simply finish our meal. It did not. My mother lowered her glass, her eyes darting straight across the table to lock onto me. She pointed her silver fork in my direction with the casual, heavy-handed authority she used to dictate our entire lives. She smiled a tight, controlling smile, but her voice left absolutely no room for negotiation. She announced to the table that since Jamal had finally finished the basement in his house, I would be packing up my apartment and moving in with them by the end of the month. Chloe needed her rest with the new baby coming, my mother reasoned, and I was going to be there live and nanny. I carefully set my water glass down on the coaster. I looked my mother directly in the eye and said, "Absolutely not." The air in the room instantly shifted. The celebratory warmth evaporated, replaced by the familiar, suffocating hostility I had grown up with. My mother slammed her hand down on the table, rattling the expensive silverware. She leaned forward, her voice rising in pitch, demanding to know what else I possibly had going on in my life that could be more important than serving my family. She told the entire table that my little computer hobby was not a real career, that I spent all day staring at glowing screens instead of building a respectable life. She casually dismissed the decade I had spent clawing my way to the top of the cybersecurity sector, treating my grueling hours and massive success as if I were simply playing video games in a dark room. My father jumped in right on cue, desperate to protect the golden child dynamic. He pointed a heavy finger at me, accusing me of being selfish and bitter. He said, "I was just jealous of Jamal because Jamal was a real adult providing a future and grandchildren for this family while I was 35, single, and failing at my basic duties as a woman." He told me that family requires sacrifice, and that I had never sacrificed a single thing for my brother, completely ignoring the countless times I had bailed them all out of financial ruin. Before I could even respond to my father, Chloe let out a loud theatrical sigh. She crossed her arms over her chest, her tone dripping with the kind of racial entitlement and classist superiority she usually tried to mask at family gatherings. She looked at me with pure condescension and told me we needed to be realistic. She stated clearly that I had no husband and no prospects of ever getting one. She actually had the nerve to say that raising her mixed kids was the closest I was ever going to get to having a real family of my own, and that I should view moving into their damp basement as my training for womanhood. The sheer audacity of her words settled over me like a sheet of ice. I did not yell. I did not cry. I did not let them see a single fraction of the pain they were trying to inflict. I picked up my cloth napkin, wiped my mouth with deliberate slowness, and dropped it onto my untouched plate. I looked directly at my brother, completely ignoring his wife. I asked Jamal loudly and clearly how exactly he planned to feed a third child when his credit cards were completely maxed out, and he had just begged me for a $5,000 personal loan 2 weeks ago to keep his electricity from being shut off. Jamal turned a deep, blotchy shade of purple. He stammered desperately, waving his hands to shush me, throwing panicked glances at Chloe, who suddenly looked very confused and alarmed by the mention of his hidden financial disaster. My mother erupted. She screamed that I was a liar, that I was trying to ruin her son's beautiful marriage out of pure spite, and that I was a toxic presence in their perfect home. She stood up from her chair, her face twisted in a rage I had seen 100 times before, and delivered her ultimate rehearsed threat. She told me that if I walked out of her dining room door, I was dead to this family and they would cut me off entirely. I stood up slowly from the table. I adjusted my coat and picked up my purse, feeling the solid weight of my own independence in my hands. I looked at my mother, who was waiting for me to crumble and beg for forgiveness, just like I did when I was a terrified teenager trying to earn her love. Instead, I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed in the silent dining room. I told my mother she could not cut off the person who pays her monthly phone bill, her car insurance, and the property taxes on the very house she was currently screaming in. I turned my back on them. My father yelled my name, demanding I come back to the table and show some respect to my elders. Chloe was demanding to know what I meant about the credit cards, her voice rising in panic. Jamal was loudly denying everything, swearing I was just making up stories because I was miserable. I did not stop walking. I opened the front door, stepped out into the crisp November air, and closed it firmly behind me, cutting off the noise of the family that had spent my entire life treating me like a disposable afterthought. I drove back to my place, feeling a profound, heavy sense of peace settling over my chest. I slept better that night than I had in years, free from the burden of trying to appease people who were fundamentally committed to misunderstanding me. The drive home gave me enough silence to separate insult from fact. Fact. Jamal was expecting a third child. Fact. My parents had decided without asking me that his growing family created an obligation in my life. Fact. Chloe believed my being single made my time less valuable. In fact, none of them knew what my life actually looked like because they had never bothered to ask. I did not live off family money. I had not accepted help from Calvin or Brenda since college. The monthly phone bill I covered from my mother, the insurance payment I picked up when my father claimed a bonus was delayed, and the property tax shortage I quietly handled last spring all moved in one direction from me to them. The computer hobby was Apex cybersecurity and data analytics. I founded Apex after years of contract security work building breach response systems for companies that could not afford public failure. One client became 5. 5 became 50. By 35, I employed teams in incident response, fraud analytics, cloud security, and digital forensics. We occupied 3 floors of a downtown Atlanta tower. My parents had never visited, not once. When I invited them to the first office opening, Brenda said she already had a brunch. Calvin asked whether Jamal could use the conference room for a loan officer networking event. After that, I stopped inviting them. They preferred believing. I stared at screens all day because that version of me fit the family hierarchy. Jamal was the legacy. I was the utility, the person who paid when something broke, fixed a password, when somebody was locked out, found a discount, when Brenda wanted a new phone, and was always assumed to have time because I had not married or had children. At home, I took off my coat and placed my purse on the counter. My phone had 3 unread messages. I opened the family group chat once. Brenda, you embarrassed your brother. Calvin, you will apologize tomorrow. Jamal, you had no right to mention my finances in front of Chloe. Chloe, do not contact us until you are ready to act like family. Then Brenda again. We already decided the move will happen before Christmas. Stop being difficult. I stared at that last sentence. The move, not if, not would you. The decision existed in their minds as a completed event. My consent was an inconvenience they expected to solve after the fact. I muted the chat. Before bed, I opened a secure property dashboard and checked the Oakwood estate. The renovations were nearly finished. New impact-resistant windows had been installed on the lower floor. The perimeter cameras were online. The gate access system had been upgraded that week. I had purchased the estate 11 months earlier because I wanted space privacy and eventually a place where I could host people without living out of a condo. Nobody in my family knew. I had not hidden it as a test. I had kept it private because privacy was the only boundary they respected when they did not know where to push. The tax notice, Calvin later admitted reading, had been delivered to my condo because the mailing address on the property account had not yet been updated. He saw Oakwood Drive and a multi-million-dollar valuation, but his own assumptions did the rest. In his mind, there was no possible world where I owned the estate. Therefore, the document had to mean something else. That arrogance would cost them more than they understood. I set my alarm for 6:30. At 5:58, my phone rang first. The Oakwood estate had been the first large purchase I made without telling anyone in my family. That choice was not about secrecy for its own sake. It was about learning from repetition. When I bought my first car, Calvin asked whether Jamal could borrow it for a few weeks because his lease was over mileage. When I earned my first significant bonus, Brenda sent me a list of home repairs she thought I should cover. When Apex became profitable, Jamal began calling every cash crisis a bridge loan. Anything visible became available. Oakwood was different. I bought it because I wanted one place that existed outside the family economy. No emergency claims, no assumptions, no keys copied just in case. The morning Jamal broke the window, that private decisions suddenly became evidence of something larger. My parents did not simply believe family should help family. They believed my ownership was provisional until somebody they valued more needed the asset. That was the idea I was finally refusing. I woke up at 6:00 the morning to the harsh ringing of my cell phone. I fully expected it to be an angry text storm from my mother or a pathetic graveling apology text from Jamal begging me not to tell Chloe the full extent of his debts, but it was not. The caller ID showed a local police precinct. I answered the call, my voice rough from sleep. The man on the other end identified himself as Officer Daniels. He asked if I was Kendra. I said yes. He told me they had a Jamal Adams in custody. The officer explained that Jamal had been caught breaking into a gated estate on Oakwood Drive with a rented moving truck in the middle of the night. My brother had shattered a reinforced window, tripped a high-grade security system, and when the police arrived on the scene with their lights flashing, he arrogantly claimed I was his sister and that I had given him the property as an early baby gift. The officer paused and asked me directly if I wanted to come down to the station and sort this out as a family misunderstanding, or if I wanted to proceed with the felony breaking and entering charges. I pulled the blankets off my legs, stood up, and told the officer I would be there in 20 minutes to press full charges. Officer Daniels came through a secured door a few minutes later carrying a tablet. He was younger than I expected, professional, and visibly tired from the early shift. He asked me to step into a small interview room away from the lobby so he could verify my statement without my parents interrupting every sentence. Brenda objected immediately. Why does she get a private room? We are the parents. The sergeant looked at her. Because she owns the property. That sentence followed me down the hallway. Inside the interview room, Officer Daniels pulled up still images from Oakwood. He did not dramatize them. He simply asked questions in order. Did you give Jamal Adams permission to enter B? No. Did you authorize him to bring a moving truck? No. Did you give him a key code or access credential? No. Did you transfer any ownership interest to him? No. He showed me an image of the broken pane. Did you authorize this damage? No. Then he showed me footage from the driveway camera. Jamal was pointing toward the house, while officers stood near the truck. The audio captured pieces of his explanation. My sister said this would be ours. She owns it. Family property. My mother told me to come here. I closed my eyes for a second. Officer Daniels noticed. Do you want a break? No. Do you feel threatened by him? Not physically at this moment, but I want the record to reflect that he attempted to occupy a residence after I explicitly rejected the idea of moving into his home as childcare. My mother admits she gave him my address after my father went through my mail. He typed, "Understood." I asked what would happen next. He explained that the investigation would be forwarded through the normal process, that property damage and unauthorized entry would be documented, and that charging decisions were not mine to make. Jamal's release conditions, if he was released, would depend on the case and court procedures. That answer grounded me. My family had always treated institutions as extensions of whoever shouted the loudest. Brenda expected police to obey the mother. Calvin expected a bank title to obey the father. Jamal expected a locked house to obey the brother. I had built my life around systems, because systems, when they function properly, do not care who believes they are entitled. When I returned to the lobby, Calvin was no longer shouting. He was staring at the county property record on the sergeant's screen. The parcel number matched Oakwood. The assessed value matched. The owner line showed Kendra Adams. His mouth tightened. When did you buy this? 11 months ago. With what money? Mine. Why did you not tell us? Why would I? His eyes widened. Because we are your family. You went through my mail and sent Jamal to move into it. Because we thought you were wasting the property. I laughed softly. A property you did not know I owned. Brenda stepped between us. Enough. We can solve this. Let Jamal stay there until the baby is born. He already moved half the nursery. The truck goes back. Kendra, no. Those children need space. Then their parents can rent space. You have 6 bedrooms. None of them are available. Brenda's face hardened. One day you are going to need family. Maybe. But I will never need family badly enough to hand over my front door. A buzzer sounded behind the desk. An officer entered from the secured corridor and quietly spoke to the sergeant. Through the narrow glass window in the door, I saw Jamal for the first time that morning. He looked furious. Not ashamed. Furious. He spotted me and immediately started talking through the glass, his words muted. I did not need audio to read his mouth. "Fix this." I looked away. Chloe crossed the precinct lobby so quickly that an officer near the entrance stepped sideways to intercept her. She stopped just short of me, breathing hard, her coat hanging open over yesterday's maternity dress. "You put my husband in jail," she repeated. "No, Jamal broke into my house. The police put him in custody. He was moving his family into a home his sister owns. That is not a crime. It becomes one when the sister never invited him, and he breaks a window with a tire iron." Her eyes flashed. "Drop it." The sergeant behind the desk looked up. "Ma'am, this is not a private charging decision. We are documenting what happened." Chloe ignored him. "Kendra, I am pregnant. I have 2 children at home. You know what this is doing to me." I almost admired the speed with which she changed from contempt to victimhood. 12 hours earlier, I had been an unmarried failure whose highest possible purpose was raising her children. Now, the fact that she had children was supposed to erase her husband's conduct. Brenda moved beside Chloe. "Tell them you gave him permission. 1 sentence. That is all this takes." "No." Calvin stepped toward me. "You are going to destroy your brother over a window." "No. Jamal is dealing with the consequences of entering a property that did not belong to him. Those are different things." His jaw tightened. "Family does not involve police. Then family should not involve burglary." A younger officer approached the desk with a folder. He quietly told the sergeant that photographs from the scene had been uploaded. I saw one image as the folder opened. The broken lower pane glass scattered across the mudroom tile, a tire iron lying near the door. Chloe saw it too. Her expression flickered, but only for a second. Then she turned back to me. "You think because you bought some house? You're untouchable. I think because I bought a house, I get to decide who lives in it." She laughed sharply. "Do not get comfortable. I know people in this city. Connor's family knows people in this city. Country club boards, school boards, corporate boards. You have no idea how quickly doors can close when people learn what kind of person you are." "Connor?" I asked, before remembering her brother was not part of this story. The threat was hers, built out of connections she believed mattered more than facts. She stepped closer. "I know where you work." That sentence made Brenda visibly calmer. She mistook it for leverage. Chloe continued, "I am going to tell your bosses that you had your own brother arrested the morning after Thanksgiving because you are unstable and vindictive. I will tell them how aggressive you are. I will tell them exactly what kind of woman they hired." I tilted my head. "You should probably verify who hired me before you do that." She did not hear the warning. "I will make sure your ghetto attitude gets you fired by noon." The lobby went silent. Even Calvin looked uncomfortable. I had spent my entire professional life learning how to stay still when someone expected anger from me. There are moments when rage is useful. There are also moments when the most devastating response is to deny another person the emotional spectacle they came to provoke. I looked at the sergeant. "Are we finished with my statement?" He nodded. "For now, an investigator may contact you. I will make myself available." Brenda rushed after me as I turned toward the exit. "Kendra, do not walk away from me." I kept walking. "Kendra." I pushed through the precinct doors into the cold morning and headed toward my car. Chloe followed me all the way outside. "I mean it," she shouted. "I'm going to your office. I'm going to make sure everybody there knows what you are." I unlocked my car. Then I looked back at her. "Please do." She smiled, convinced she had finally frightened me. She had no idea she had just scheduled her own humiliation. The investigator called later that afternoon to confirm that Jamal had been released under instructions to stay away from Oakwood while the matter proceeded. The moving truck company retrieved its vehicle. My contractor boarded the broken window until replacement glass arrived. Then the family group chat came alive. "Brenda, you went too far." "Calvin, a criminal record can destroy your brother's career." "Jamal, call me now." "Chloe, this is not over." I muted the thread. At 3:12, Jamal called from a new number. I answered once because I wanted to know whether there was anything about the incident I had missed. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "Good afternoon. You let them process me like some criminal. You broke a window because you changed the codes. I never gave you codes. Mom said you would. Mom does not own Oakwood." He went silent for half a beat. Then he changed tactics. You embarrassed me in front of Chloe. You embarrassed yourself in front of the police. You think that house makes you better than me? No. Then why are you acting like this? Because the house is mine. He exhaled hard. I have children. Yes, another one coming. Congratulations. You have no idea what responsibility looks like. I almost laughed. Jamal, you drove a moving truck to my property at 4 inches the morning because you wanted a free house and a free caregiver. Do not lecture me about responsibility. His voice lowered. You told Chloe about the credit cards. I asked you at dinner how you planned to support another child. You knew exactly what you were doing. I knew you had asked me for money. You always do this. You use information to make people look small. That sentence was revealing. In Jamal's mind, the problem was never the debt. It was the fact that I knew about it. Do not contact me about Oakwood again, I said. If your lawyer needs information, they can contact mine. You have a lawyer now. I have had one for years. He cursed. Then he said something that explained why Chloe would appear at my office the next morning. We are not going to let you destroy us. The call ended. I stood in my kitchen listening to the silence. Destroy us. I had not touched his accounts. I had not called his employer. I had not contacted his wife. I had said no to childcare and reported a broken window. But in a family built on entitlement, the person who stops cooperating is always described as the aggressor. That evening, my head of security at Apex received an email from a public account associated with Chloe. It asked for the building address and the name of Kendra's supervisor. The message was forwarded to me because my legal team had already placed a harassment note on the incident file. I read it once, then I went to sleep. Apex occupied the top 3 floors of the tower, but I still arrived through the same lobby as everyone else whenever my schedule allowed. I liked seeing the company at ground level. A decade earlier, Apex had been me a borrowed laptop and a contract to clean ransomware out of a dental network after midnight. I learned network architecture because nobody would take my calls unless I could solve a problem before they asked who I knew. I learned sales because banks did not extend generous credit to young Black women with no family capital. I learned payroll because employees deserved to be paid before founders congratulated themselves. By 35, the little computer hobby my mother mocked had expanded into breach response, risk analytics, fraud monitoring systems, and digital forensics. I had never hidden the company. My family had simply refused to look. At holidays, they asked Jamal about promotions and asked me whether I still worked online. When I said I was busy, Brenda called it antisocial. When I bought my condo, Calvin assumed I had overextended myself. When I helped with their property taxes, they treated the money like a daughter's duty, rather than evidence that perhaps their picture of me was wrong. That morning, I had a client review at 9 and a product briefing at 10. Chloe arrived at 8:17. She was not interrupting an imaginary tech support shift. She was walking into the headquarters of the company she had threatened to get me fired from. I watched the lobby camera for almost a full minute before going downstairs. The receptionist remained composed while Chloe raised her voice. I want the manager. May I ask what this concerns? It concerns one of your employees abusing confidential information and terrorizing her family. Do you have an appointment? No. I have a right to report misconduct. You may submit a complaint through our website or legal department. I am not filling out a form. 2 clients waiting for temporary badges glanced toward her. That bothered me more than the insult. My employees should not have to absorb my family drama. I called security. Stay nearby. Do not touch her unless she refuses a lawful instruction or creates a safety issue. Then I stepped into the elevator. I had no interest in the screaming match. The truth waiting on the lobby wall was enough. I spent the rest of the morning dealing with damage estimates and insurance documentation. The Oakwood contractor met the glazier. My security administrator pulled the complete access log. My attorney confirmed that the police had what they needed from me and advised me not to engage my family further. By noon, Jamal had been released pending the next steps in the investigation, with instructions to stay away from Oakwood. That was not mercy from me. It was procedure. I had no interest in inventing legal power I did not possess. I wanted facts, preserved boundaries enforced, and every consequence to come from what people had actually done. At 8:17 the following morning, I was standing in my corner office on the 31st floor of Apex Cybersecurity and Data Analytics when my assistant called. There is a woman in the lobby demanding to see your manager. I looked through the glass wall toward reception. Chloe. She was wearing sunglasses inside and carrying a large designer bag like a weapon. Even through 2 sets of doors, I could see her arguing with the receptionist. What is she saying? That an employee named Kendra Adams is dangerous, that we employ criminals, and that she wants the CEO immediately. I smiled. Do not tell her anything. I am coming down. The elevator opened directly behind reception. By the time I stepped out, Chloe had gathered an audience. 2 junior analysts had stopped near the coffee bar. A vendor waiting for a badge was pretending not to watch. Security stood 10 feet away, close enough to intervene, but giving the receptionist space to handle the situation professionally. Chloe slapped both hands on the marble counter. I am not leaving until somebody with authority comes down here. This woman had her own brother arrested because she is jealous of his family. She is unstable. She should not be anywhere near confidential client data. The receptionist kept her voice calm. Ma'am, you are disrupting a private workplace. Call the CEO. I am here, I said. Chloe turned. For one beautiful second, she looked relieved. Then she recognized me. Her face tightened. I am not talking to you. I said, call the CEO. I walked past her and rested one hand lightly on the reception counter. Behind me, 20 in platinum letters covered the main wall. Apex, cybersecurity, and data analytics. Below them in smaller letters, founded by Kendra Adams. Chloe followed my gaze. Her eyes moved from the wall to me, then back to the wall. I am the founder and CEO, I said. The smugness disappeared so completely, it was almost physical. No. Yes, you told us you worked in computer support. I never told you that. Your family decided that anything involving a computer was tech support. She stared at the lobby around her as though it had changed shape. The private elevator, the security desk, the rows of glass offices, the people who had stopped talking when I arrived. I continued. You came into my company, threatened my employment, insulted my staff, and announced private family accusations in a Client F-facing lobby. Chloe found her voice. You are proving my point. You are vindictive. No. I am enforcing a workplace boundary. I looked at security. One of the guards stepped forward carrying a single-page document. Our counsel prepared this after yesterday's threat at the precinct. I said, you are formally banned from entering Apex offices or contacting employees about me outside legitimate legal channels. If you have a complaint, send it through counsel. The guard handed her the notice. Chloe refused to take it. He placed it on the counter. Her breathing quickened. You cannot do this to me. I just did. She grabbed the paper, crumpled it, then looked around as if expecting somebody to defend her. Nobody moved. Security approached from either side. They did not grab her or drag her theatrically. They simply stood close enough that the path to the revolving doors became obvious. Chloe backed away. Then her panic converted into one last threat. Laugh all you want. Your parents already filed papers. They are taking everything you own. That got my attention. She saw it and smiled. Your company, your house, all of it. They finally figured out what is wrong with you. The guards escorted her through the doors. I stood in the lobby for 3 seconds processing the sentence. Then my phone buzzed. An email from Attorney Jackson. Subject urgent. Petition served. I opened the attachment. Calvin and Brenda were petitioning the court for emergency control over my affairs, alleging that my decision to report Jamal's break-in proved I was mentally unstable and incapable of managing significant assets. I read the first page twice. Then I started laughing. I did not return to my office immediately after Chloe left. I stood near reception and watched the revolving doors finish turning. The ban notice remained on the marble counter where she had crushed it. Security retrieved it, scanned it for the incident file, and noted the exact time she was escorted from the building. That level of documentation might seem excessive to somebody outside my profession. To me, it was normal. Apex existed because people remember stories differently once consequences appear. Logs do not. Camera timestamps do not. Access control records do not. Signed notices do not. I had spent my career telling clients that the most valuable evidence is often the boring thing nobody thinks to preserve. Now, my own family was teaching the same lesson in real time. My assistant asked whether she should cancel my morning meetings. No. Are you sure? Yes. I had a client waiting upstairs. That became another quiet act of resistance. My parents' petition depended on a portrait of me as unstable and consumed by family conflict. Chloe had come to my workplace hoping to create exactly that image. If I abandoned every responsibility because she screamed in the lobby, I would be helping her write the story. So, I went to my 9 review for 45 minutes. We discussed intrusion detection vendor risk and response times. At 9:52, the client signed a renewal. At 10:05, I reviewed hiring numbers. At 10:30, I approved a training budget. At 11, Attorney Jackson arrived with a printed copy of the petition. We sat at the same conference table where I had closed acquisitions and crisis plans. He placed the papers between us. Your father signed under oath. I read the affidavit. Calvin described me as increasingly secretive. He cited my refusal to disclose Oakwood. He described Apex's security systems as evidence of paranoia. He claimed my decision to prosecute family conflict rather than resolve it privately suggested impaired judgment. Brenda's affidavit was worse. She said I had rejected natural feminine and family roles and become hostile toward relatives after professional success. I looked up. Did their lawyer actually file this sentence? Yes, good. Attorney Jackson raised an eyebrow. Why good? Because every page tells the judge what this is really about. Control, not capacity. I kept reading until I reached the request for authority over company distributions. Then I closed the packet. Let's go to mediation. After security escorted Chloe from the building, I gathered the employees who had witnessed the scene. This should not have happened in your workplace, I told them. If anyone receives calls, messages, or social media contact about my family, forward it to legal. Do not respond. You are not responsible for defending me. The receptionist looked relieved. One of the analysts asked whether the woman was actually related to me. Unfortunately, that earned a small laugh and released some tension. Then I went upstairs and called Attorney Jackson before opening the conservatorship attachment. He had represented Apex through acquisitions, employment disputes, and the occasional client who believed a contract was merely a suggestion. He also handled my personal asset planning because successful founders learn very quickly that professional and private exposure like to meet in ugly places. He did not laugh when I described Chloe's threat. Do not underestimate people who are willing to use a court filing as a family weapon. He said the petition may be weak, but weak filings can still create noise. What do they have? Affidavit. From whom? Your parents. Jamal. 2 extended relatives. What do they say? That you became paranoid after professional success? That you isolate yourself? That you bought property secretly? That you are obsessed with security? That you had Jamal arrested without reason? I looked at the wall of my office where a framed National Cybersecurity Award hung beside a photograph of my first 5 employees. Obsessed with security is a strange accusation against a cybersecurity CEO. I had the same thought. What do they want? Temporary authority over major assets, access to business distributions, and control of the Oakwood residents while they pursue a capacity evaluation. Do they mention Jamal trying to move into it? No. Do they mention the broken window? No. Do they mention Mom giving him the address? No. Attorney Jackson paused. Kendra, this is not really a competency petition. I know it is leverage. I know. Then do not give them an emotional record to use. That advice mattered. The family wanted anger because anger was easier to photograph than context. I spent the rest of the day doing exactly what they claimed I could not do. I chaired a security review, approved payroll, negotiated a renewal with a healthcare client, signed off on a data center expansion. Then at 5, I opened the petition again and read every page. By the end, I had highlighted one sentence from Calvin's affidavit. Kendra's recent wealth has exceeded her emotional capacity to manage it responsibly. The family should supervise her resources for the benefit of all legitimate heirs. Legitimate heirs. Not my health, not my safety. He had written the motive into the filing. I sent the sentence to Attorney Jackson. His reply came seconds later. Keep that highlighted. Before we left the office that evening, Attorney Jackson made me walk through the petition line by line as if I were a hostile witness. Why did you buy Oakwood without telling your parents? Because I am 35. Better. He crossed out my first sarcastic answer. Why did you install a high-grade security system? Because the property was vacant during renovation and contained expensive equipment. Why did you refuse to withdraw your statement against Jamal? Because he entered without permission and caused documented damage. Why have you reduced contact with your family? Because they repeatedly disregard boundaries and pressure me for money and labor. He nodded. That is how we answer. Facts, no speeches. Then he moved to the part of the case I cared about most. Your father's file. I leaned back. The independent team is still reviewing it. Yes. And you remain recused. Good. Apex's client counsel confirmed that the anomaly predates the family dispute. The system alert was generated under the existing audit engagement. Nobody can credibly say you invented the investigation after Thanksgiving. I exhaled. That mattered. Not because Calvin deserved protection from the consequences, because I refused to let my company become a weapon in a family fight. Can the compliance summary be used tomorrow? Only the portion council has cleared. No unnecessary customer data. No phishing expedition. We use it solely to challenge the idea that Calvin is the appropriate fiduciary for your assets. Exactly. Attorney Jackson closed the file. Kendra, there is a chance the mediator never needs to see it. Their petition is weak. I know you still want the dossier in the room. Yes. Why? I looked through the glass wall toward the city. Because my father has spent my entire life defining competence as obedience. If I am quiet, he calls me weak. If I succeed, he calls me selfish. If I say no, he calls me unstable. Tomorrow, I want one conversation where the facts do not bend around his title. Attorney Jackson studied me. Then bring facts. I did. Attorney Jackson called before I reached my office. Kendra, tell me you are sitting down. I am not. You may want to. I read it. He exhaled. They are asking for temporary conservatorship authority control over your company distributions and access to the Oakwood estate. The petition is weak, extremely weak, but they attached affidavit from relatives claiming you have become erratic, paranoid, and financially reckless. Financially reckless. Apparently, purchasing a house without telling your parents is evidence of secretive behavior. I looked out over downtown Atlanta. What happens next? The emergency request is not automatically granted. The court set a preliminary conference and mandatory mediation because your parents are framing this as a family capacity dispute. They cannot simply walk into court and receive your company, but they are trying to create a record they can weaponize. When tomorrow morning, good. There was a pause. Good. Tell them I will be there. Kendra, I assume you want us to move to dismiss. We will, but not before mediation. He knew my tone well enough to wait. I walked to my secure conference room and opened an internal compliance folder. For the past 6 weeks, Apex had been conducting a contracted cybersecurity and transaction integrity review for a local community credit union. The engagement was not a secret. It was one of our largest regional projects. What my family did not know was that Calvin managed one of that credit union's branches. 3 weeks earlier, our anomaly detection team identified unusual routing behavior connected to a church trust account administered through his branch. Because Calvin was my father, the moment his employee identifier appeared in the access logs, I removed myself from the investigative chain. Outside counsel documented the conflict. An independent forensic team took over. I did not review private customer files or use client data for personal leverage, but the matter had already escalated through the credit union's compliance department, and my attorney had received a legally releasable summary after Calvin's petition placed his conduct and claimed need for financial control directly at issue. The summary was ugly. $200,000 had moved from a community church trust through a sequence of internal transfers into an account tied to a shell entity connected to Calvin. I had not caused the discovery. I had not searched for it. My father had walked into a trap built by his own greed. Jackson, I said into the phone, tell the independent auditors to finalize the conflict-cleared summary and preserve every access log. He went quiet. You are thinking what I think you are thinking. My father is asking a court to give him control of my wealth because he says I cannot manage money. Yes, and there is an active compliance file showing $200,000 routed from a church trust through his credentials. Yes. Then I would like him to explain both positions in the same room. Attorney Jackson made a sound that was almost a laugh. I will see you at mediation. The next morning, the conference room was intentionally bland gray carpet, white walls, a polished table, water pitchers, legal pads. Calvin sat at the head as though the chair itself proved authority. Brenda sat beside him in a navy dress and church pearls. Their lawyer had 3 binders stacked in front of him. I sat across from them with Attorney Jackson. The mediator reviewed the purpose of the session. She emphasized that no one was being declared incompetent at that table, that mediation was not a substitute for evidence, and that any transfer of authority would require lawful agreement or court action. Calvin barely waited for her to finish. My daughter has become hostile and irrational. He said she had her own brother arrested. She hides property. She refuses family responsibilities. She built a company without allowing us any oversight. I raised an eyebrow at the last sentence. Brenda dabbed dry eyes with a tissue. We are terrified for her. Their lawyer slid a document across the table. A power of attorney. If Miss Katie Adams truly has nothing to hide, he said she can voluntarily authorize her father to oversee major financial decisions until the court determines whether further protection is necessary. I did not touch it. Calvin leaned toward me. This is for your own good. You have too much money for a single woman with no family responsibilities. Jamal has children. He is the future of this family. I can manage your assets in a way that benefits everyone. There it was. Not concern. Redistribution. The mediator looked at me. Miss Adams, would you like to respond to the concerns about your competency? No, I said. Brenda smiled. I reached down, opened my briefcase, and removed a thick black dossier. I would like my father to answer a financial question instead. I slid the dossier across the table. It stopped directly in front of Calvin. His smile disappeared. I spent the evening before mediation preparing 2 different files. The first was the defense attorney Jackson would use if the petition moved forward. Corporate financial statements, tax returns, board resolutions, property records, insurance policies, medical records showing no diagnosis of incapacity, and affidavit from people who actually worked with me. The second file contained nothing about me. It contained the family pattern, transfers I had made over the years when Brenda could not cover property taxes, the car insurance premiums I paid after Calvin's bonus supposedly arrived late, Jamal's requests for emergency loans messages where my parents described those payments as what daughters do. Attorney Jackson looked through the folder over video call. We may not need any of this. I know. Then why collect it? Because I want to remember that this did not begin at Oakwood. He understood. The conservatorship petition was only the latest attempt to convert my competence into family property. When I succeeded quietly, they called me selfish. When I paid their bills, they called it duty. When I stopped paying, they called it instability. I shut the folder. At 11:30, my chief financial officer sent the normal weekly liquidity dashboard for Apex. Cash position strong, payroll funded, client renewals on schedule. Nothing was on fire. I saved the report. The next morning, my father would tell a mediator that I could not manage money. I intended to let him finish the sentence before I answered. The mediation began with 20 minutes of manufactured concern. Their lawyer spoke first. He said, my parents were not seeking to punish me. They were responding to a pattern of alienation and erratic financial conduct. He mentioned Oakwood 3 times. He mentioned my company's estimated value twice. He mentioned my marital status once, which the mediator immediately questioned. What does Miss Adams being unmarried have to do with capacity? Their lawyer adjusted his glasses only that she lacks a spouse who might naturally provide oversight. I looked at Attorney Jackson. He wrote 1 word on his legal pad. There, Calvin spent his turn telling the room about sacrifice. He described paying for childhood piano lessons I had stopped taking at 12, as though that created a lien on a cybersecurity company founded 15 years later. He mentioned food school uniforms, braces, and the roof under which I had grown up. Every ordinary parental responsibility became an invoice. I built this family, he said. My daughter thinks success means she no longer answers to anyone. The mediator asked, does she pay her bills? Calvin hesitated. That is not the point. Does she maintain employment? She owns a company. Has the company defaulted? No. Has a physician determined she lacks capacity? No. But has she been hospitalized for a psychiatric condition? No. Has she lost assets through reckless transactions? No. The question stripped the petition down quickly. Brenda stepped in with tears. She used to be sweet. I almost smiled. Now she is cold. She talks about boundaries. She keeps secrets. We did not even know she owned a $2.5 million house. The mediator looked at me. Did you have a legal obligation to disclose the purchase to your parents? No. Brenda slapped her tissue onto the table. That is exactly what I mean. Their lawyer pushed the power of attorney toward me again. This is a voluntary temporary arrangement. Mr. Adams would approve major transfers, business distributions, and real estate transactions. Would he be permitted to distribute my assets to Jamal? I asked. Calvin answered before his lawyer could. If the family needed it, Attorney Jackson leaned back. The mediator stopped writing. I asked, would he be allowed to use company money to pay Jamal's debts? Calvin's face hardened. A family business supports family. Apex is not a family business. Everything you have came from us. No, my childhood came from you. Apex came from me and the people who built it. Brenda began crying harder. See how she speaks to us. I looked at the mediator. You asked whether I had a defense of my competency. My answer is that I have managed a profitable company, multiple properties, audited financial statements, payroll tax obligations, and client fiduciary requirements without my parents' supervision. If they have medical evidence showing incapacity, they can present it to the court. Their lawyer opened his mouth, I continued. But before Mr. Adams is presented as the safer financial manager, I believe one active compliance matter is relevant. That was when I reached for the black dossier. Calvin stared at the black dossier for several seconds without opening it. What is this? He asked. Something I think the mediator should see before anybody gives you power over another person's money. Their lawyer reached for the folder. Attorney Jackson placed 2 fingers on it first. The material in that packet is a conflict-cleared summary from an existing compliance matter. He said it has been shared through proper counsel. We are not asking this room to adjudicate a criminal case. We are responding to Mr. Adams' assertion that he is the appropriate person to control Miss Adams' finances. The mediator looked at Calvin. You may open it. He did. The first page was a flowchart. A church trust account appeared at the far left. 3 internal transfers moved through separate ledger entries. The final path ended at a shell account controlled through an entity connected to Calvin. $200,000. Calvin's face lost color. Brenda leaned over his shoulder. What is that? Nothing, he said too quickly. I opened my own copy. Apex was contracted to review transaction, integrity, and cybersecurity controls at your credit union. Our system flagged irregular movement from a community church trust. The employee access trail passed through your branch credentials. You were spying on me? No. The anomaly was detected by the audit team. The moment your identity appeared, I recused myself. Outside counsel and an independent forensic team handled the rest. He threw the page onto the table. This is fabricated. Attorney Jackson slid a second sheet forward. The credit union's compliance office has already preserved the underlying logs. Brenda turned to Calvin. What church trust? He looked at her and then away. That was the first moment she seemed genuinely frightened. Calvin had spent decades presenting himself as the moral center of our family. He was a branch manager, deacon, neighborhood fundraiser, the man who stood at church breakfasts explaining financial discipline to younger couples. He loved giving advice because advice allowed him to feel superior without revealing his own behavior. The mediator spoke carefully. Mr. Adams, I am not here to investigate banking misconduct, but if the basis for this petition is your financial judgment, this information is obviously relevant to whether voluntary authority should be transferred to you. Their lawyer whispered something to Calvin. Calvin ignored him. You think because you built some technology company, you can come in here and humiliate your father? I did not move the money. You have always hated me. I did not move the money. You resent the fact that Jamal has a family. I did not move the money. The repetition finally broke through his performance. His eyes dropped to the paper. Brenda's voice became thin. Calvin, answer me. He pushed back from the table. It was temporary. Nobody moved. He realized what he had said. Attorney Jackson did not react. The mediator did not react. I certainly did not help him. Brenda stared at her husband. What was temporary? Calvin rubbed both hands over his face. There were timing issues. The church account was sitting there. I moved funds between accounts. I was going to replace everything. $200,000. It was not supposed to stay out. I felt no triumph yet. Only confirmation. Where did it go? I asked. His head snapped toward me. That is none of your business. You asked a court to give you my company because you say you manage money better than I do. It became my business the moment you signed that petition, their lawyer said sharply. My client is not answering further questions about an unrelated compliance review. Attorney Jackson nodded. That is his right. Then we can return to the petition, which we will move to dismiss. The mediator was about to suggest a recess when the conference room door slammed against the wall. Jamal stumbled inside. His shirt was half-buttoned, his tie hanging loose, his face slick with sweat. Sir, you cannot just... A receptionist started behind him. Jamal did not even look at me. He ran straight to Calvin and grabbed both of his shoulders. Dad, you have to help me right now. Calvin shoved his hands away. What are you doing here? The bank called. The loan is in default. They are moving on this collateral. I need money today, Brenda stood. What loan? Jamal froze. I watched calculation move across his face. He had entered the room expecting Calvin to save him privately. He had not expected attorneys and mediator me or the black dossier sitting open on the table. Brenda repeated. What loan, Jamal? He looked at Calvin. Calvin looked back at him, and for the first time I understood that my father already knew there was something, just not how bad it was. Sit down, Calvin ordered. I cannot sit down. If we do not cure the default, they are going forward. On what? Jamal's eyes filled. Brenda's expression changed. Jamal, she whispered, what did you use as collateral? He stared at the carpet. She took one step toward him. We paid our mortgage off 5 years ago. His shoulders collapsed. Not your mortgage. The room went silent. He swallowed. My loan. Calvin stood very slowly. What did you do? Jamal finally looked at him. The one I took out against your house. Calvin tried to recover after admitting the transfer had been temporary. He straightened the audit pages as though neat paper could restore authority. The church has never lost a dime because of me. The mediator asked, Has the $200,000 been returned? He hesitated. No. Then the church has lost access to $200,000. It is an accounting timing issue. Attorney Jackson did not speak. Neither did I. Brenda looked at Calvin with growing horror. You told me the branch was doing well. It is. You told me we were secure. We are. You gave Jamal church money. I gave our son money to solve a crisis. With whose permission? Calvin slammed his hand on the table. I have managed that branch for 23 years. Do not interrogate me like a thief. The word hung in the air, thief. Nobody had used it. He had supplied it himself. The mediator said quietly, Mr. Adams, this room is no longer appropriate for discussing an active compliance issue. I suggest you consult separate counsel. Calvin looked at me. This is what you wanted. No, do not lie. I wanted you to stop trying to take my company. Same thing. That answer told me everything. To Calvin, any outcome where he did not control me felt like an attack. The door burst open before I could respond. Jamal entered carrying an even larger disaster. For several seconds, nobody seemed to understand the sentence. Brenda blinked as if the words had arrived in the wrong language. Our house, she said. Jamal nodded once. No. She shook her head. No, because you cannot borrow against our house. Your name is not on the deed. Jamal did not answer. Calvin moved around the table. Son. His tone had changed. It was no longer the voice he used to praise Jamal's legacy. It was low and dangerous. How did you put a loan on my house? Jamal's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I knew before he confessed. Fraud always has a moment when the person who built it realizes the story is too complicated to maintain. The lies begin colliding with each other. Every answer creates 3 more questions. Eventually, silence becomes the only remaining defense. Attorney Jackson quietly closed his notebook. The mediator said, This session needs to stop. But Brenda was already moving. She grabbed the front of Jamal's shirt. How? I can fix it. How? I thought I could. How? He pulled away. I signed Dad's name. Calvin's entire body went rigid. Jamal rushed forward with the explanation words spilling out faster than thought. It was just to get the bridge loan. I needed liquidity. I had a betting position that was supposed to clear. And then the line moved and I lost more than I expected. I knew the house had equity. I was going to repay it before anybody knew. You forged my signature? Calvin asked. I had copies from old paperwork. Brenda made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not anger. Fear. Jamal kept talking. The lender wanted notarized documents. I handled it. I had someone verify identity remotely. Attorney Jackson looked at me. I understood the look. Do not ask follow-up questions. That could turn this mediation into an improvised interrogation. Let the admission stand. Calvin stepped backward until his legs hit a chair. How much? Jamal rubbed his face. 750,000. Brenda screamed. The mediator stood and opened the conference room door, asking staff to notify building security and suggesting everyone contact independent counsel immediately. Their lawyer was whispering urgently into his phone now. Calvin looked from Jamal to the audit dossier. The 200,000, he said. Jamal shut his eyes. That was when the final connection clicked into place for Brenda. She looked at Calvin. You gave him that money. Calvin said nothing. You stole $200,000 from the church trust and gave it to him. I was trying to fix a family problem. You told me the church transfers were routine. I was going to replace it. Jamal sat down hard. I lost it. Calvin turned toward him. What? The 200? I used it to cover the margin calls in the cards. You lost $200,000. The bets moved. Calvin lunged. Attorney Jackson and the mediator both moved at once while Jamal stumbled backward. There was no dramatic punch. Only chaos chairs scraping. Brenda shouting their lawyer, yelling for everybody to stop. I remained seated. For years, my parents had insisted Jamal was the responsible one, and I was the selfish one. They had built an entire family hierarchy around that fiction. Calvin stole to rescue his son. Jamal gambled away the rescue and forged his father's signature against the family home. Brenda had tried to assign me free childcare because she believed my time had no value. Now their choices were colliding in one sterile conference room. The mediator finally restored enough order to speak. This mediation is terminated. Any conservatorship discussion can proceed through court. Everyone should leave. Brenda turned toward me. The look on her face stunned me because it contained no shame, no apology, no recognition that they had been trying to take my company 40 minutes earlier, only expectation. Kendra, I stood and closed my briefcase. She stepped closer. You have to fix this. No, do not start. I am not starting anything. Liquidate whatever you need to liquidate. Sell stock, take money from that company, pay the loan, and save our home. I looked at the conservatorship petition still sitting on the table. You just spent the morning arguing that I am mentally incompetent to manage assets. Brenda's nostrils flared. So, I would think an unstable woman should not be making $750,000 rescue decisions. This is not the time for sarcasm. It is not sarcasm. Calvin looked at me now, his face gray. Kendra, your mother is right. We can discuss everything else later. No, Jamal stood. Please. I looked at him. He had tears in his eyes. 2 nights earlier, he had allowed his wife to tell me that raising his children was the closest I would ever come to having a family. Now, he needed my money to save the house he had secretly collateralized. I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge, clarity. No, I repeated. And for once, the word did not feel like a beginning of an argument. It felt like an ending. The lender's preliminary file arrived in Attorney Jackson's inbox before we left the building. He did not show me confidential material we were not entitled to possess. He showed me the public Lion-recorded mortgage instrument and a summary supplied by counsel representing the lender after Jamal's emergency demand created a dispute over ownership and signature authority. The documents explained why Jamal had panicked. Payments had stopped 3 months earlier. The loan had been accelerated. Notices had gone unanswered because Jamal had routed correspondence to an address Brenda and Calvin did not regularly monitor. A foreclosure sale under the senior lien was already moving separately. The family home was not suddenly disappearing because of one bad morning. It had been collapsing quietly for months. Jamal had simply managed to keep everyone looking somewhere else. Attorney Jackson pointed to the signature block on the disputed second mortgage that is represented as Calvin's signature. It is not his. You are certain. I have seen his signature my entire life. That is not enough for court. I know the lender will obtain an examiner if necessary. I nodded. That distinction mattered too. My expertise was cybersecurity and data analytics, not handwriting identification. I could notice a discrepancy. I could not declare forensic certainty outside my field. In the lobby, Jamal paced in circles while Brenda argued with Calvin. You knew he was borrowing money. I knew he had cash flow problems. You stole church money for him. I moved it temporarily. Stop saying temporarily. Jamal looked at me. Can Apex loan me the money? No. I will repay it. No. At least buy the note. That caught my attention only because of the irony. What? If the lender sells the debt, buy it. You buy distressed stuff all the time through those investment clients. Apex is not an investment fund. Then use your personal money. I stared at him. He genuinely believed every financial concept I understood existed to rescue him. Jamal, if a third party eventually acquires that debt, they will enforce it. Not if it is you, especially if it is me. He looked shocked. Why are you acting like you hate me? I do not hate you. Then help me. I can care about you and still refuse to finance fraud. His eyes hardened. That is the same thing as hate. No. That is what accountability feels like when you have spent your life being protected from it. When Brenda demanded I liquidate Apex to save the house, I picked up the conservatorship petition from the table. The pages were still warm from the fluorescent conference room lights. I held them where she could see her own signature. Read your allegation on page 6. I do not need to read anything. Then I will. I found the paragraph. Kendra Adams demonstrates impaired judgment in financial matters and should not be permitted to execute significant transfers without supervision. Brenda's face tightened. I lowered the page. That was your position this morning. This is different. Why? Because this is family. You said my company needed to be protected from me. We were trying to protect you from yourself, and now you want me to remove hundreds of thousands of dollars from that same company to cover Jamal's forged debt. Stop twisting words. I am reading yours. Calvin sat heavily in his chair. Kendra, enough. I looked at him. He seemed suddenly older. Do you know what the most insulting part is, Dad? He did not answer. You did not even ask me for help before filing this petition. You tried to legally remove my authority first. You were not asking for a sister to rescue Jamal. You were trying to take control of the rescue fund. His eyes dropped. That silence hurt more than denial would have. Jamal stepped closer. I did not know they were filing that. Did you sign an affidavit? He looked away. Jamal. Mom said it was temporary. I laughed once. The same word Calvin used for the church money. Temporary theft, temporary control, temporary lies. Nothing counted as wrong if they planned to undo it after getting what they wanted. I am not paying the loan, I said. Brenda opened her mouth. I raised my hand. I am not selling Oakwood. I am not borrowing against Apex. I am not replacing money. Dad moved from the church. I am not fixing Jamal's credit. I will provide any lawful information required by investigators, and then I am going home. You cannot leave us like this. I did not put you here. That was the exact moment Chloe entered from the hallway and asked what had happened. The family fracture that followed was no longer mine to prevent. Brenda followed me into the elevator. The doors had barely closed when she pressed the emergency stop button between floors. Attorney Jackson immediately reached past her and released it. Do not do that again, he said. She ignored him. Kendra, listen to me. I have listened to you for 35 years. We can still contain this. There is nothing to contain. There are investigations. Investigations can be managed. Attorney Jackson said, Mrs. Adams, be careful. She turned on him. This is family. Then stop asking my client to solve potential crimes with private money. Brenda faced me again. Sell Oakwood. No. Take a loan against it. No. Liquidate some of that company. No. Her voice became desperate. Your father could go to prison. Then he needs a criminal defense attorney. Jamal could lose everything. Then he needs counsel, too. We could lose the house. That process is already underway. She stared at me. What kind of daughter says those things? The kind who refuses to become evidence. The elevator opened. Brenda followed us into the parking level. You are enjoying this. No, do not lie. I stopped beside my car. I spent years paying bills you never thanked me for. I paid your phone, your insurance, property taxes when Dad said the branch bonus was delayed. I sent Jamal money twice before I stopped. I solved emergencies because I thought one day the emergency would end and you would finally see me as family. She folded her arms. And the emergencies never ended because rescuing you taught you there was no cost to creating them. For the first time, she did not have an immediate answer. I continued. Yesterday you told a court I should not control my own company. Today you want me to sell it to save Jamal. I never said sell all of it. That is your defense. Her mouth tightened. Then the elevator opened again behind us. Chloe stepped out. She had followed Jamal into the building, and the next fracture began before Brenda could answer. Chloe appeared in this doorway while Jamal was still begging. She had followed him to the building after seeing location alerts and missed calls. Her face was flushed from the elevator ride, but the anger in her eyes was directed at me. "What did you do now?" Jamal turned. "Chloe, not now." She looked around the room and noticed the expressions. The mediator packing her files. Brenda crying. Calvin leaning against the table, their lawyer on the phone. "What happened?" Nobody answered. Chloe stepped toward Jamal. "What happened?" He rubbed both hands down his face. "The house is in foreclosure." "Our house?" "No." She stopped. "Whose?" He looked at his parents. Chloe's eyes widened. Slowly, she turned toward Brenda and Calvin. "You put a loan on their house." Jamal did not answer. That was answer enough. She laughed once in disbelief. "How?" Brenda pointed at me as if I had created the problem. "Because Kendra has been poisoning everything since Thanksgiving." I almost admired her consistency. Chloe ignored her. "Jamal, how did you borrow against a house you do not own?" he whispered. I signed Dad's name. The color disappeared from her face. She took 2 steps backward. "You're serious?" "I was going to fix it." "How much?" $750. Her mouth opened. Then Calvin said, "And I gave him 200,000 before that." Chloe stared at him. "From where?" Nobody answered. She saw the black dossier. She picked up the first page. Her eyes moved down the highlighted transfers. "Oh my God." Calvin snatched it from her. "Put that down." She looked at Jamal again and something in her expression broke. For years, Chloe had defended him because his family image supported her own. She liked the country club photos, the church galas, the language about legacy and property and respectable black success. She liked being able to tell people she had married into an established Atlanta family. Now she saw the balance sheet behind the performance. Debt, forgery, embezzlement, and the possibility that the house she had treated like an inheritance was going to a lender. Her reaction was not grief. It was contempt. "This is what I married into." Jamal flinched. "Chloe, no. Do not say my name." She looked at Calvin and Brenda. "You people sold me a lie." Brenda straightened. "Excuse me. You told my family Jamal came from money." The room chilled. "You told us you had property investments, church influence, bank connections. You acted like your son was some rising financial star." "Watch your mouth," Calvin said. Chloe laughed. "Why?" "Because the respectable family is broke." Jamal stepped toward her. "Stop." She turned on him. "I married you because you told me this family had structure. Because you said I would never have to worry about instability. And now I find out you are a gambling addict who forged your father's name." Her language sharpened. The mask she had worn at dinner disappeared. She looked at Brenda with open disgust. "I left people in my own family who warned me not to marry into chaos like this. I defended you because I thought you were different, established, educated, respectable." The word respectable carried the insult she intended. Brenda heard it. "So that is what you think of us." "I think I was promised a wealthy black family with standards, not broke criminals pretending to be elite." The room went dead silent. Jamal whispered, "Chloe." She turned toward me then, and the cruelty found one final direction. "And you do not stand there looking righteous. You always acted like you were better than everybody." "No," I said. "I acted like I did not want to be your nanny." She pointed at me. "You enjoyed this. I did not forge a mortgage. I did not move church money. I did not file a conservatorship petition." Her face twisted. For the first time, she had no story that placed me at the center of the damage. She yanked her wedding ring off. Jamal saw it. "Do not." She threw it at his chest. The ring struck his shirt and bounced onto the carpet. "I am taking the children to my parents." "Chloe, please. You will communicate with me through a lawyer. You cannot take my kids. I can leave a house built on fraud." She turned and walked out. Jamal followed her into the hallway. "Chloe." She never looked back. The elevator doors closed. Jamal returned to the conference room slowly, as if his body had aged 20 years and 60 seconds. Then he dropped to his knees. Not in front of me, in the middle of the carpet. He put both hands over his face and sobbed. Calvin watched his golden sun break. His breathing changed. At first, I thought he was crying too. Then he gripped the table. "Dad," Jamal said. Calvin's other hand moved to his chest after Chloe threw the ring. Jamal crawled across the carpet to pick it up. He held the band in his palm and stared at it. "She is emotional," Brenda said. No one answered. "Pregnancy hormones," she added. I looked at her in disbelief. Even now, she needed a story that protected Jamal from reality. Jamal looked up. "She is leaving me," Calvin snapped. "Then go after her," she said, lawyer. "She is bluffing." "No, Dad. She is done." Brenda turned on me. "This is because you exposed his debts." "No, this is because he had debts." "Same thing." I almost smiled at how perfectly mother and father matched. Information was always the villain in this family. Not conduct, not theft, not forgery, not debt. The person who revealed the problem became the problem. Jamal stood and wiped his face. If Kendra had loaned me $5,000 2 weeks ago, I could have kept the cards current. I stared at him. $5,000 would not have fixed $750,000. It would have bought time. For what? He had no answer. For another bet, I asked. His jaw tightened. Calvin made a small sound. We all turned. He was gripping the table with both hands now. His breathing had become shallow. Brenda rushed toward him. "Calvin." He tried to say something and could not finish. That was when his hand moved to his chest. After Chloe walked out, Brenda went after her. She made it to the elevator just as the doors closed. She screamed, hitting the call button again and again. "Come back here. We can work this out." Jamal stood several feet behind her, holding the wedding ring. "Mom, stop." She turned on him. "Call her. She blocked me." "Then use my phone." "She will know." "Go after your wife." Jamal looked down at the ring. I do not think this is about one argument. That was the first honest thing he had admitted about his marriage. Calvin remained in this conference room staring at the audit file. I watched him add numbers in his head. 200,000 missing, 750,000 inches disputed debt, house in foreclosure, legal costs, conservatorship case collapsing, golden child's marriage breaking. For a man who measured safety through reputation and money, it was an avalanche. Brenda came back into the room. She pointed at Jamal. "You destroyed us." His face crumpled. I said I was sorry. Sorry does not save a house. Neither does yelling. She raised her hand. For a moment, I thought she might slap him. She stopped herself. Then she turned toward me. "This is what you wanted. You always hated being second." I stared at her. "Mom, your son forged Dad's signature, and your husband moved church money. You exposed it." There it was again. Exposure as sin, truth as betrayal. I felt something inside me finally detach. I am done being the person you blame for seeing what is in front of me. Calvin inhaled sharply. His hand moved to the edge of the table. I noticed before Brenda did. "Dad." He tried to straighten. Then the color left his face. Calvin's knees buckled before anybody reached him. The mediator caught the back of his chair as he went down. Jamal scrambled across the carpet, shouting, "Dad!" over and over. Brenda screamed for a doctor as though there might be one hidden behind the conference room wall. I was already on my phone. 911. Adult male. Approximately 65. Chest pain. Difficulty breathing. Possible cardiac event. "We are on the 4th floor of." Brenda turned on me while I was still speaking. "Do something. I am calling an ambulance." "Not that. Fix this." Even with her husband on the floor, she meant the money. That realization removed the last bit of shock from me. I finished the call, gave the dispatcher the building access instructions, and knelt several feet from Calvin. The mediator had first aid training and was keeping him still. I did not crowd him or pretend I had medical expertise. I simply stayed close enough to answer questions when paramedics arrived. Calvin was conscious. His face looked gray, sweat beaded along his hairline. He stared at me once, not with love, with accusation. As though my refusal to absorb the consequences of his choices had physically injured him. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They attached monitors, gave instructions, and moved him onto a stretcher. Brenda followed them into the hall, then doubled back just long enough to point at me. "If your father dies, this is on you." Attorney Jackson stepped between us. "No, Mrs. Adams." She glared at him. He kept his voice level. "Do not say that to my client again." The ambulance took Calvin to the hospital. Jamal disappeared with Brenda. Their lawyer left carrying the conservatorship binders that had suddenly become the least important documents in his possession. The mediator asked whether I needed a moment. "I need a copy of the termination notice for today's session." She gave me one. Attorney Jackson and I rode the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, he finally spoke. You understand? None of this is your responsibility. I understand. Do you? I looked at him. Yes. And I did. That was the difference between the woman I had been at 25 and the woman I was at 35. 10 years earlier, Brenda's accusation would have crawled inside my chest and lived there. I would have spent the night constructing ways to save Calvin Jamal, their house, the church account, Chloe's marriage, and everybody's reputation. Now I could separate compassion from rescue. I could hope my father survived without paying $750,000 to erase Jamal's fraud. I could care whether he lived without agreeing that his heart was my hostage. At the hospital, Calvin was stabilized. The initial assessment pointed to a mild stress-induced cardiac event. He would need monitoring medication and follow-up, but he was awake and responsive. I waited long enough to hear that from medical staff. Then I went for coffee. Brenda found me in the corridor. She had somehow changed. Not physically. Her mascara was smudged, her coat was wrinkled, and her hands trembled. But emotionally, she had moved from panic back into strategy. She pulled a folded packet from her purse. Sign this. I stared at it. What is it? A property transfer? I almost smiled. Whose property? Oakwood. The coffee machine hummed behind me. Brenda shoved the papers toward my chest. We sell your estate. We replace the church money before the board turns this into a scandal. We cure Jamal's loan. Your father retires quietly. The family survives. You want me to give you a $2.5 million house? It is a house. It is my house. Family protects family. You petitioned a court yesterday to take my company because you were acting irrationally, and now you want the irrational woman to sign away real estate. Her eyes hardened. This is not about logic. Your father is in a hospital bed because you refuse to help. No, my father is in a hospital bed after an embezzlement investigation and learning his son forged his signature. She thrust the papers at me again. You owe us this, Kendra. Sign it or the stress will kill your father. I looked at her. Then I looked at the transfer deed, a bad document drafted in a hurry, attempting to push Oakwood into an entity controlled by my parents. I could have torn it in half. Instead, I lowered my eyes and let my shoulders sag. For the first time in years, I gave Brenda the expression she wanted to see. Defeat. Okay, Mom, I whispered. I'll sign it. Her entire face changed. I stayed at the hospital for 90 minutes after Calvin was stabilized. Not because Brenda demanded it, because despite everything, I wanted to know whether my father was going to live. The cardiologist described the event as mild, but significant enough to require observation. Stress was likely a trigger, but stress was not a moral verdict. Nobody in that hospital blamed me. Nobody said a daughter's refusal to transfer millions of dollars had caused a medical emergency. Only Brenda did that. Attorney Jackson sat with me in the waiting area while I answered work messages. At one point, he looked at my laptop. You're reviewing a client risk report in a hospital. I am apparently too unstable to manage my finances. He smiled briefly. Then his expression turned serious. The conservatorship team filed a notice asking to continue the matter despite today's mediation collapse. Of course they did. We will oppose it. Today's record hurt them badly. Can they use Dad's medical event? They can mention anything. That does not make it evidence of your incapacity. I closed the laptop. What about the credit union? Internal counsel confirmed Calvin is suspended from system access pending review. The church account has been frozen against further unauthorized movement. Nobody is asking you to do anything. That was the first good news of the day. I leaned back. No rescue. What? That is what I keep reminding myself. I can cooperate. I can provide lawful evidence. I can protect my company. But I do not rescue. Attorney Jackson nodded. Good rule. Brenda appeared 20 minutes later with the transfer deed in her purse. By then, I was calm enough to recognize the opportunity she was handing me. Not an opportunity to trick her into signing something she did not understand. An opportunity to let her choose the audience for the truth. When she demanded Oakwood, and I said, Okay, Mom. I'll sign it. Attorney Jackson looked at me like I had suffered the heart attack. I gave him the smallest shake of my head. Trust me, he did. Brenda's relief was immediate and ugly. I knew you would come to your senses. I held up one hand before she could open the packet. One condition. Her smile tightened. What? We do it formally. It is notarized. I mean publicly. She frowned. I took a slow sip of coffee. You and Dad have spent 2 days telling relatives that I am unstable, selfish, and incapable of managing money. Jamal told police I gave him a house. You filed a conservatorship petition. If I am going to transfer Oakwood and pay what you say I owe this family, I want witnesses that the debt is finished. What witnesses? The community elders, the credit union board, extended family. Her suspicion lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then vanity won. I watched it happen. Brenda imagined a room full of people seeing me submit. She imagined herself standing beside Calvin, graciously accepting the property from the daughter she had publicly condemned. She imagined rewriting the entire week into a morality play where the rebellious child finally recognized her duty. Tomorrow morning, she said, at the church community hall, 10. Fine. And Jamal comes. Of course, Attorney Jackson will prepare the final packet. Her eyes narrowed. Why him? Because if I am transferring millions of dollars, I want my lawyer present. She considered arguing, then decided the audience mattered more than the details. Done. She snatched the draft back and folded it carefully into her purse. Do not change your mind. I won't. Brenda walked away with an energy I had not seen since Thanksgiving. Halfway down the corridor, she was already dialing someone. I heard the first sentence. Kendra finally understands what family means. I waited until the elevator doors closed behind her. Then I called Attorney Jackson. He answered on the first ring. How is Calvin stable? Mild cardiac event. And you? Fine. He knew there was more. What did Brenda do? Asked me to transfer Oakwood so she can sell it, replace the church money, and pay Jamal's forged loan. Silence. And I said, yes. Another silence. Then carefully, you said what? I told her I would sign tomorrow at the church in front of the credit union board and community elders. Kendra Jackson pulled the title and foreclosure file on my parents' house. What are you thinking? Jamal's lender is already enforcing against it. We know the second mortgage was procured through forgery. We also know there is a senior lien position and the family is in default on taxes and related obligations because Dad has been feeding Jamal money. I am listening. I do not want to buy their house through some magical overnight transfer. I want to know the actual status. If the lender has already completed or scheduled a foreclosure sale, find out whether the note or resulting bank-owned property can be acquired lawfully through an affiliate. I was quiet for several seconds. You want the debt? I want the right to stop them from using that house as another weapon. That could take time. Then find the fastest lawful path. No shortcuts, no fabricated leverage. If title cannot close before tomorrow, we do not pretend it has. That was important. Sweet revenge is only sweet if it does not require you to become the fraud you are exposing. Attorney Jackson exhaled. I will call the Lenders' Council. Also, I want copies of the conservatorship petition, Jamal's property break-in report, the forged loan records we can lawfully obtain, and the conflict-cleared credit union audit summary in separate sealed packets. For the church, for the witnesses, Brenda requested his voice changed. Now he understood. Anything else? Yes. Preserve Chloe's messages. During the precinct confrontation and the office ambush, Chloe had sent a series of texts to family members and mutual contacts. Some were simply insults, others were more revealing. She had complained repeatedly about this family, embarrassing her in front of white friends, described Calvin's church circle as provincial, and mocked Brenda's obsession with appearing wealthy enough to be accepted by people who still look down on them. I did not intend to expose every ugly private sentence for entertainment, but the outline of her contempt mattered because Brenda and Calvin had made Chloe's approval part of the case against me. They had held her marriage up as proof of Jamal's success and my failure. Use only the messages already voluntarily forwarded to us by recipients, I said. Nothing hacked, nothing private. We do not have a lawful copy of. Understood. I ended the call. When I returned to Calvin's room, Brenda was seated beside his bed, telling Jamal that tomorrow would fix everything. Jamal looked up at me. Mom said, "You are selling Oakwood." I said I would handle the matter tomorrow. His eyes filled with hope. That almost hurt more than the insults. Not because I wanted to save him, because he still believed love meant somebody else paying the bill. I turned to leave. Brenda called after me. Wear something respectable. The board will be there. I looked back. I will. By the time I reached home from the hospital, Brenda had already created the guest list for my surrender. She texted Attorney Jackson instead of me. Make sure Kendra brings the original Oakwood deed. He forwarded it with no comment. I replied, tell her we will bring the documents legally required. 5 minutes later, another message arrived through a cousin. Your mother says she is proud of you for finally accepting responsibility. I set the phone down. The most dangerous temptation in family conflict is the urge to correct every lie immediately. I had spent years doing that. No, that is not what happened. No, I did not say that. No, I paid that bill. No, I did not refuse to help. Every correction created another argument. This time, I let Brenda talk. While she built her public victory attorney, Jackson's team worked. They verified the foreclosure timeline, contacted lender counsel, confirmed that the senior lender had already taken title, obtained an appraisal, created an affiliate structure separate from Apex operating assets, so the company itself was not casually turned into a landlord, prepared a purchase agreement, subject to ordinary closing conditions. Everything boring, everything documented, everything my family never imagined because they believed wealth operated through declarations instead of contracts. At midnight, Jackson sent me one line, paper beats volume. I slept peacefully. By 9 that evening, Brenda had converted my supposed surrender into a public relations campaign. Messages began arriving from relatives I had not heard from in months. Your mother says you are finally making things right. Proud of you for stepping up for family. Glad you realized blood comes first. I did not correct any of them. The next morning, social media filled in the details. A cousin posted that the Adams family would be gathering at the church community hall for a testimony of restoration. Another relative wrote that I was buying my parents a new home after years of selfish distance. Jamal told somebody I had agreed to rescue the family because I finally understood what motherhood and sacrifice meant. Not one version mentioned that Jamal had broken into Oakwood. Not one mentioned the conservatorship petition. Not one mentioned the forged loan. Not one mentioned $200,000 missing from a church trust. Brenda had always been talented at turning consequences into persecution and rescue into proof that she had been right all along. At 8:30, Attorney Jackson called. We have a path. I sat at my kitchen island. Tell me the lender accelerated the second mortgage months ago because the loan package is now under fraud review. The note itself is messy, but the senior lender also initiated foreclosure based on other uncured defaults tied to the property. The sale was completed yesterday morning. The bank took title as the only qualifying bidder. I closed my eyes. So, the house is bank-owned. Correct. Your parents are occupants now, not owners. And the bank will sell. Yes. They were already preparing to market it as ARO. An Apex affiliate can purchase at independently appraised value with a normal closing. We negotiated a signed purchase agreement this morning. Recording will not happen before the church meeting, so you cannot truthfully say you own it yet. Good. He laughed softly. Most clients would not call that good. I would rather be accurate. We can, however, disclose that your affiliate has contracted to acquire the property and that after closing counsel will serve whatever occupancy notice is legally required. The bank has also agreed to assign the remaining rights connected to the default package subject to the fraud investigation. Then that is what I say. No more. No more. At 9:47, I arrived at the church. The parking lot was full. Brenda had outdone herself. Community elders sat in the first 2 rows of the hall. Members of the credit union board had been invited under the impression that the Adams family would be making a major charitable announcement. Extended relatives filled folding chairs behind them. A few people from the church finance committee were there too. Calvin arrived in a wheelchair against medical advice, but with a discharge plan that allowed him to attend briefly. He wore a suit over a hospital wristband. He looked smaller than I remembered. Jamal stood beside Brenda in a navy blazer, trying to recover the posture of the golden sun. Brenda wore white. Of course, she did. She moved through the room, greeting people with damp eyes and a brave smile. When she saw me, she opened her arms. I did not step into them. She whispered, "Do not embarrass us." I would never want to distort the truth. She mistook that for obedience. Attorney Jackson waited near the podium with a rolling case full of sealed packets. At 10 sharp, Brenda took the microphone. She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about family restoration, forgiveness, the burdens of parenting adult children, and the importance of honoring one's elders. She said the past few days had been painful, but that God had softened Kendra's heart. I sat in the front row and let her finish. Then she invited me to the podium. The room applauded politely. I walked to the microphone carrying my black briefcase. Attorney Jackson and 2 staff members distributed sealed packets. One went to Brenda, one to Calvin, one to Jamal, one to each credit union board member. Separate packets went to the community elders and selected relatives whose statements had been attached to the conservatorship petition. Brenda held hers up and smiled toward the room. "Is this the deed?" she asked. "Open it?" She tore the seal. Her smile disappeared. The first page was not a transfer of Oakwood. It was a copy of her conservatorship petition. Behind it sat the audit summary. Behind that, the property and loan documents. Her lips moved without sound. Finally, she looked at me. "What is this?" Before Brenda opened her packet, she had already positioned 3 relatives with phones near the front row. She wanted the transfer recorded. She wanted clips. She wanted a moment she could send to every person who had questioned the family since Thanksgiving. One aunt whispered to me as I passed, "Your mother says you are giving them Oakwood." I know what she says. That is a generous thing. We will see. The church hall smelled like coffee, perfume, and old carpet. On the wall behind the podium hung photographs of scholarship recipients funded by the same community network, whose trust account now sat at the center of Calvin's audit. That detail struck me hard. The missing $200,000 was not abstract. It represented programs, repairs, scholarships, emergency assistance. Calvin had treated it like idle money because he believed he could replace it before anybody important noticed. That was the same logic Jamal used with the house. The same logic Brenda used with my time. Borrow now, replace later. Assume the other person will absorb the risk. I looked at the sealed packets. For the first time, the pattern was visible in one room. The sealed packets were deliberately different. The credit union board received only materials appropriate to their governance role. The church elders received summaries related to the trust account and the family's public claims. Extended relatives received the conservatorship filings they had been asked to support, along with non-privileged property records and the messages they themselves had supplied. I was not dumping private financial files into a room for spectacle. I was dismantling specific lies with evidence each audience was entitled to see. Attorney Jackson insisted on that structure. If you want the moment to survive outside the room, he told me accuracy matters more than applause. That sentence became my rule for the morning. Brenda did everything possible to turn the gathering into theater. She reserved the front rows, placed floral arrangements beside the podium, ordered coffee and pastries, told people there would be a family announcement. When Calvin entered in the wheelchair, several people stood and prayed over him. I watched his eyes move around the room. He looked ashamed for a second. I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the petition, the affidavit, legitimate heirs. Compassion did not require amnesia. Jamal arrived alone. Chloe had already left with the children. He kept checking his phone, probably hoping she would answer. Brenda whispered to him near the stage, "Stand straight. People are watching." Even then, even after everything, appearance first, truth later. I sat down and waited for her to invite me to the microphone. I stepped up to the microphone. "The packet is not a deed to Oakwood," I said. A murmur passed through the room. Brenda slammed her folder closed. "This is not what we agreed to. We agreed to handle the family finances in front of witnesses. You said you would sign." I said I would sign the documents necessary to settle my debt to this family. I do not owe this family a house. Calvin tried to stand from the wheelchair. A church elder placed a hand on his shoulder and quietly told him to stay seated. I looked toward the credit union board. "Please open page 1 of your packet," the board members did. The room changed before I said another word. They recognized account formatting, internal routing references, transaction dates, and the compliance case number. One man in the front row leaned closer to the document, then looked directly at Calvin. "This is a conflict-cleared summary from an investigation already in progress," I said. My company was contracted to audit cybersecurity and transaction integrity. When my father's employee credentials appeared in an anomaly, I recused myself. The credit union's independent compliance team and counsel preserved the evidence. Calvin raised his voice. "You are using private bank records to attack your family." A board member answered before I could. "Calvin, this matter was referred to us before today." His face went still. I continued. $200,000 moved from a community church trust through transactions linked to an account controlled by my father. The The finance committee members began whispering. Brenda stood. These are lies. The head of the credit union board did not raise his voice. The routing numbers match. Brenda turned toward him. You do not know what you are talking about. He held up the page. I know our routing architecture. That ended the first lie. I looked toward the community elders. Please open page 2. Their packets contained the property records connected to Calvin and Brenda's house, the lien history, and certified summaries of the disputed loan documents. Jamal obtained a $750,000 loan using his parents' home as collateral. The loan documents contain a signature represented as Calvin's. In mediation yesterday, Jamal admitted that he signed his father's name. Jamal jumped up. That was privileged. Attorney Jackson stepped forward. Your admission occurred in a mediation setting and will be treated according to applicable confidentiality rules. The packet does not contain the mediation statement. It contains lender documents and information separately obtained through lawful channels. That distinction mattered. I was not going to win by misusing privileged communications. The relevant authorities and lender are handling the alleged forgery independently, I said. I am not asking this room to convict anyone. Jamal sank back down. Brenda pointed at me. You are destroying your brother. No, I am refusing to hide what he did. I turned to the extended family. Page 3. That packet contained something different. Screenshots and transcripts of messages Chloe had sent to relatives, who later volunteered copies to Attorney Jackson after the family dispute became public. One said she was exhausted by pretending Brenda's little church circle was high society. Another mocked Calvin's obsession with being treated as old Atlanta money. A third complained that she had married into a family that talked about black excellence every 5 minutes because they were terrified everyone else could see how broke they were. The room went quiet in a different way. I did not read every insult aloud. I did not need to. My point was not to turn Chloe's racism and classism into entertainment. It was to show the hypocrisy of the hierarchy my parents had built. At Thanksgiving, Chloe's marriage had been presented as proof that Jamal had succeeded and I had failed. My single status was treated as evidence that my life had less value. Brenda and Calvin had demanded I serve a woman who privately despised the exact family image they sacrificed me to protect. You spent years telling me Jamal's marriage made him the true heir, I said. You called me jealous because I did not have what he had. This is what he had. Jamal covered his face. Brenda shouted, Enough. I looked at her. She marched toward the podium. These documents are fake. She is bitter. She has always hated her brother because he gave us grandchildren. An elder stood. Brenda, sit down. She ignored him. Throw her out. This is God's house. The head of the credit union board rose slowly from his chair. His expression was grim. Brenda, stop. She turned. He tapped the audit packet with one finger. The transfer references match our internal records. The employee access identifiers match. This is real, the hall erupted. Questions. Who from every direction? Calvin, did you move church money? Jamal, you mortgaged their house. Why did you tell us Kendra was giving them a new mansion? Why did you file to take her company? Brenda backed away from the podium. Calvin stared at the floor. Jamal looked toward the exit. The same people who had spent 24 hours congratulating my parents for bringing me back into line were now realizing they had been invited to witness the collapse of a story. I raised one hand. The room quieted just enough. I am not finished. The reaction to the first 3 pages was not uniform. Some relatives looked shocked. Some looked embarrassed. A few looked angry at me for exposing the evidence publicly, because secrecy had always been mistaken for loyalty in our family. One uncle stood and said, This should have stayed private. I looked at him. My parents filed a public legal petition attacking my competency and invited this room to witness what they said was my financial surrender. He sat down. A church elder asked Calvin directly whether he had authorization to move the trust funds. Calvin stared at the table. His silence answered. Another board member asked Jamal whether the loan documents had been signed by Calvin in person. Jamal said, I have counsel. That was the smartest sentence he had spoken all week. Attorney Jackson nodded slightly, approving the decision not to keep confessing. Brenda, however, had no such restraint. Everybody here has borrowed money. A woman from the finance committee replied, Not from the church trust without approval, Brenda snapped. Do not judge my husband. The woman answered, I am asking about money entrusted to the church. The shift was complete. For years, Brenda controlled rooms by framing every challenge as disrespect. Now, the room had documents. Documents do not care who is offended. I opened my briefcase and removed one final envelope. This is the part my parents invited all of you here to celebrate. Brenda's face tightened. I held up the conservatorship petition first. 2 days ago, my parents asked a court to declare me incapable of managing my own assets because I reported Jamal's break-in at Oakwood. Gasps moved through the back rows. They asked for authority over my company and my estate. The reason was not medical evidence. There is no diagnosis. There was no capacity evaluation showing I could not manage my affairs. Their argument was that I was aggressive, secretive, unmarried, and unwilling to support Jamal. Attorney Jackson stood beside the podium, expression neutral. The petition will be challenged through the court. I said, I am not asking this room to decide it. I am telling you what they asked for. I turned toward Calvin. You said the family needed a patriarch controlling my money because Jamal was the true heir. He said nothing. I turned toward Brenda. You told police Jamal should live in my Oakwood estate and I could sleep on the couch while raising his children. Her jaw trembled. I turned toward Jamal. You broke a window and tried to move your family into a house you did not own. He stared at me. Then when your own debts caught up with you, Mom demanded I liquidate my company to rescue you. I let the silence sit. This family has spent years describing my boundaries as selfishness. The truth is simpler. You did not want a daughter or a sister. You wanted an emergency fund with a pulse. Somebody in the back whispered. Lord. Brenda found her voice. You said you would save the house. No. You decided I would. She looked at the final envelope in my hand. What is that? The actual property update. For the first time, Calvin looked up. I opened it. The house you and Dad have been living in was already lost before yesterday's hospital scene. Brenda's lips parted. What? The senior lender completed foreclosure after uncured defaults. The bank took title. You are currently occupants of bank-owned property. Calvin stared at Jamal. Jamal looked confused. The second mortgage. Your forged loan accelerated the collapse. But it was not the only default. The house had tax and senior lion problems too. Dad kept redirecting money into your emergencies while telling everyone the property was secure. Brenda shook her head violently. No, we own that house. Attorney Jackson spoke. The foreclosure deed was recorded yesterday. Her knees seemed to weaken. I continued. This morning, an affiliate of Apex signed a purchase agreement to acquire the bank-owned property at independently appraised value. Closing and recording are being handled by counsel. I do not own it this second, and I will not lie about that for drama. The room was silent enough to hear the microphone hum. But once the acquisition closes, my company will own the house, Calvin whispered. Why? Because you are going to keep using it as leverage over everyone around you because the bank was going to sell it anyway, because I would rather control the transition than watch another predatory buyer exploit the mess. Brenda suddenly smiled, a desperate, irrational smile. So we can stay? No. The smile vanished. Counsel will serve the legally required notice after closing. Based on the occupancy status and the agreement being prepared, you will have 30 days to vacate unless the law requires longer. Jamal stood. You cannot evict Mom and Dad. I looked at him. You tried to move into my other house without asking. He sank back into his chair. Brenda began crying. Real tears this time. You are doing this because we wanted you to help with the children. No, I left Thanksgiving because you wanted me to become free labor. Everything after that came from choices you made trying to punish me for saying no. She pointed at me. You bought our house just to humiliate us. No, I bought a bank-owned property after your financial decisions put it into foreclosure. The humiliation came from inviting the entire community to watch what you thought would be my surrender. The sentence landed because that part was entirely hers. Nobody had forced Brenda to invite the elders. Nobody had forced her to summon the credit union board. Nobody had forced her to tell relatives I was giving them a mansion. She had built the stage. I had simply brought accurate documents. Calvin put both hands over his face. Jamal dropped to his knees beside the wheelchair. Mom, I am sorry. Brenda looked at him with a kind of hatred I had never seen before. Get away from me. He started crying. The room dissolved into noise again. The credit union board members were already stepping into the hallway to make calls. The church finance committee gathered around the audit summary. Relatives moved away from Brenda in visible increments, the same way people move away from a spill spreading across a floor. I closed my briefcase. Before leaving the podium, I looked across the room one final time. You told me family means sacrifice. Maybe it does, but sacrifice that is demanded only from one person is not family. It is extraction. I zipped the briefcase. 30 days. Then I stepped down from the stage and walked out through the double doors without looking back. Outside the church, cold air hit my face with enough force to make me inhale sharply. Attorney Jackson followed me through the doors. You okay? Yes. Behind us, the hall sounded like a market at closing time. Voices colliding, chairs moving, doors opening and shutting. My phone started buzzing before we reached the parking lot. Brenda, Jamal, 3 relatives, a church elder, then Calvin. I put the phone on silent. You are not going to answer any of them, Jackson asked. Not today. We reached my car. Across the lot, 2 credit union board members were speaking with the church finance committee. They were not celebrating. They looked grim. That grounded the moment again. The missing money belonged to real people. The loan fraud affected a real lender. The family collapse involved children. There was nothing funny about the damage. The satisfaction came from a narrower place. They could no longer make me pay for it. Attorney Jackson opened his briefcase and handed me a copy of the signed purchase agreement for the bank-owned house. Closing is scheduled for next week, and the notice after title records. We do this in the correct order. Good. He studied me. You know your mother will tell everyone you bought the house just to evict her. She would say that if I donated it to charity, probably. I unlocked my car. A voicemail notification appeared. Jamal. I almost deleted it without listening. Instead, I played it once. Kendra, please. Mom is losing it. Dad could go to jail. Chloe took the kids. I know I messed up. I know. But you can fix this. You always fix things. There it was. The real family role. Not nanny fixer. I deleted the message. Then I drove home. The first week after the church meeting was quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, quiet. My family stopped calling once. Attorney Jackson sent a formal communication requiring all legal and property matters to go through counsel. Brenda moved her campaign to relatives. Calvin moved his to lawyers. Jamal moved his to Chloe. None of it reached me directly. Apex continued its own conflict management process because my father appeared in a client compliance matter. The board reviewed my recusal and confirmed that I had not directed the underlying investigation after the conflict surfaced. That mattered to me more than any family rumor. My company survived because I had built governance stronger than my personal authority. The Oakwood criminal investigation proceeded separately from the family financial cases. The church trust investigation proceeded separately from Jamal's loan. The conservatorship petition proceeded separately from all of them. That separation protected me. My family wanted one dramatic story in which I was either villain or savior. Reality was less convenient. Each person had created a different problem. Each problem had its own evidence. Each consequence came from its own process. I did not need to orchestrate a grand punishment. I only needed to stop interfering with cause and effect. The consequences did not happen in one cinematic afternoon. Real consequences almost never do. They came in letters, interviews, court dates, account restrictions, and quiet phone calls that became more terrifying because nobody could scream them away. The credit union placed Calvin on immediate administrative leave while its investigation expanded. The Church Finance Committee filed its own report concerning the missing trust funds. After the transaction records and compliance findings were reviewed, authorities opened a formal embezzlement case. Calvin was not dragged out of the church in handcuffs for dramatic effect. He was interviewed represented by counsel and later arrested after he was medically cleared, and a warrant was issued. For a man who had spent his life telling everyone else to respect authority, the process was devastating precisely because it was procedural. There was no family member he could order to stop it. Jamal faced a separate investigation over the forged loan package property records and the break-in at Oakwood. The lender's file contained identity verification material that did not match Calvin's actual participation. The alleged notarization irregularities were referred for review. The Oakwood incident gave prosecutors and investigators an entirely separate record of Jamal behaving as though other people's property became his whenever he needed it. Chloe filed for divorce. She took the children to stay with her parents in another state while custody and support issues moved through court. She wanted nothing to do with the financial scandal after realizing the marriage she had treated as a status achievement was attached to debts, gambling, and fraud. I did not celebrate that part. Children had lost stability because adults lied. That was not a victory. The conservatorship petition against me collapsed quickly. There was no medical evidence supporting incapacity, no financial mismanagement on my side, and a mountain of records showing the petition had followed immediately after I refused to fund Jamal and reported the Oakwood break-in. My parents withdrew the request rather than continue defending it. Apex continued operating. No emergency board seized my company. No judge handed my parents my bank accounts. The fantasy that adulthood could be revoked because a daughter stopped obeying finally met paperwork. The purchase of my parents' former home closed through the Apex affiliate. Council served formal notice according to the property's occupancy status and local requirements. I did not personally stand on the porch waving an eviction paper. A process server handled it. Brenda called me 13 times that day. I did not answer. Calvin left one voicemail. Kendra, whatever happened, we are still your parents. I listened once, then I deleted it. 30 days later, the house was empty. Brenda and Calvin moved into a small studio apartment across town, while legal fees consumed what little liquid savings remained. Their church standing disappeared almost overnight. Some people abandoned them out of self-interest. Others stepped away because the evidence changed what they believed. The couple who had spent years deciding who was respectable now discovered that social approval is remarkably fragile when it has been built on performance. Jamal moved into a short-term rental while his marriage and criminal case unraveled. He sent me one message. I am sorry about Thanksgiving. I stared at it for a long time. Then I blocked the number, not because apologies are worthless, because one sentence does not erase a system of entitlement, and I was no longer available as the person who made everybody feel forgiven enough to avoid changing. 6 months later, I hosted dinner at Oakwood. Not Thanksgiving, not a holiday, just dinner. The renovations were finished. Light spilled across the infinity pool behind the house. A chef I had worked with through an Apex client event prepared the meal. My dining table was full of people who had never once asked me to become smaller so they could feel important. Colleagues, friends, mentors, attorney. Jackson stopped by long enough to raise a glass before another appointment. My executive team laughed about an early Apex office where the air conditioner broke every afternoon. A former professor told a story about the first cybersecurity competition I ever entered. Nobody asked why I was single. Nobody asked who would inherit my money. Nobody volunteered my labor. At one point, I stood at the edge of the balcony with a glass of wine and looked down at the water. For years, my family had described my independence as loneliness. They were wrong. Loneliness is sitting at a table full of people who only value you for what they can take. Peace is building a table where nobody has to earn the right to exist. I thought about Thanksgiving. Absolutely not. 2 words. That was all I had said. Every disaster that followed came from their refusal to accept that those 2 words were enough. Jamal tried to take a house because he believed my no did not matter. Chloe tried to destroy my career because she believed my no was disrespect. My parents tried to take my company because they believed my no was evidence of insanity. Then they demanded my property because they believed my father's health converted my boundary into debt. They kept escalating until facts finally became louder than entitlement. I raised my glass toward the reflection in the dark balcony doors. Family is not blood demanding sacrifice from the same person over and over. Family is mutual respect. It is protection without possession. It is love that survives the word no. Inside, someone called my name because dessert had arrived. I smiled and turned away from the balcony. For the first time in my life, walking back toward a table felt like freedom. Jamal's case took longer to settle than the family rumors suggested. He was not convicted the week after Thanksgiving. Investigators gathered lender records, authentication logs, and testimony. His attorney challenged parts of the loan file. The process moved in months, not headlines. During that time, Chloe pursued temporary custody orders through family court. I stayed out of it except when formally asked about the Oakwood incident. I did not volunteer opinions about whether Jamal was a good father. That was not my role. I provided facts. He arrived at my property with a moving truck, had no permission to enter, and broke a window after access failed. The court could decide what those facts meant for parenting arrangements. Brenda hated that I would not intervene for him. You could tell Chloe he deserves his children, she said in the only conversation I accepted through counsel. He deserves due process. So does she. The children deserve adults who stop using them as leverage. She called that cruel. I called it finished. The property transition was equally procedural. After the Apex affiliate closed on the former family home, council confirmed the notice period and served Brenda and Calvin formally. They were given time to remove belongings and identify new housing. I did not cut utilities. I did not change locks while they were inside. I did not send cameras to record the move. When the deadline arrived, they left. That was enough. The version of me they had spent years describing as vindictive did not need spectacle. I needed the door closed. A month after Calvin and Brenda left their old house, I drove past the block once, not to gloat. The route from a client meeting simply took me there. A moving van was parked near the curb. The front lawn looked smaller without Brenda's seasonal decorations. The property belonged to the Apex affiliate now, and renovation crews would eventually prepare it for sale or lease. I did not stop. At a red light, I remembered sitting in that dining room on Thanksgiving while Chloe told me I had no family because I did not have a husband or children. The sentence no longer hurt. It sounded ridiculous. My life was full. Not in the shape they demanded. In the shape I chose. The community fallout was slower and more complicated than gossip made it sound. Not everyone abandoned my parents. A few longtime friends brought Brenda food after Calvin's arrest. One church elder visited him. A cousin helped them move boxes. I did not resent any of that. Accountability is not the same as demanding social death. What disappeared was the unquestioned authority. Brenda could no longer enter a room and assume people would accept her version of events because she was the mother. Calvin could no longer lecture younger couples about financial discipline without someone remembering the church trust. Jamal could no longer borrow credibility from his father's job title. The hierarchy cracked. That mattered more than humiliation. Apex received its own share of attention after the church meeting. Rumors circulated that I had used a client audit to target my father. My board ordered an independent governance review without me asking. I welcomed it. The review confirmed the sequence I had insisted on preserving anomaly identified by the contracted system. Calvin conflict recognized my access-removed independent team, continued council control disclosure. That report protected the company and me. It also taught my staff something important. Power is safest when it leaves records. I could have built Apex around loyalty to me personally. Instead, I had built procedures capable of checking me. My parents would have hated that philosophy because it meant no patriarch sat above the rules. Several weeks after the conservatorship petition was withdrawn, Attorney Jackson sent me the final dismissal notice. I printed one copy, not for revenge, for my files. I placed it in the same drawer as Apex's incorporation documents and the Oakwood deed. Proof of things I had built, proof of something they had failed to take. Then I went back to work. There was one last family group chat message before I left the old number permanently. A relative wrote that everything could still be repaired if I would be the bigger person. I stared at the phrase. Be the bigger person had always meant the same thing. In my family, absorb the insult. Pay the bill. Rescue the person who caused the crisis, then call silence forgiveness. I did not answer. I changed my number. Not because I was afraid of them, because access is not a birthright. At Apex, the first Monday after the change felt ordinary. A vendor missed a deadline. A hospital client needed an emergency security review. 2 employees argued over resource allocation. I sat in meetings, made decisions, and went home tired for reasons that had nothing to do with my family. Ordinary stress felt like a luxury. That night, I walked through Oakwood after the contractors left. The foyer lights reflected off the same kind of polished floors my parents loved using as proof of status. But the house felt different because nobody inside it had assigned me a role. No scapegoat. No emergency fund, no future nanny, just owner, just Kendra. I stood in the empty dining room and imagined the table I would eventually fill. Not with people obligated to love me, with people who had already shown they did. The lesson was not that money made me powerful enough to defeat them. Money helped. So did lawyers, records, and ownership. But the real turning point happened before any of those things mattered. It happened at Thanksgiving when I said no and did not explain myself into exhaustion. Everything after that was simply proof of how many people had depended on my yes. They called my boundary selfish because generosity had become their business model. They called my independence loneliness because my availability benefited them. They called my competence instability when competence stopped serving their agenda. I did not need them to admit that peace did not require a confession. It required distance documentation and the courage to stop funding a role I never agreed to play. By the time dinner guests arrived at Oakwood months later, I understood something simple. A family that loves you may ask for help. It does not draft your life without your consent.